Hello, my name is Jack, and I searched my parents' names on the dark web. The videos I found were horrifying. When my friend first introduced me to the dark web, I was amazed at how something so unknown could host some of the most illegal things on Earth. Until today, I had only used it to learn how to code and commit small crimes. But after the horrifying videos I just found, I don't think I'll ever use the dark web again. I met my best friend, Rupert, when I started my freshman year of high school. My parents had moved us to a new town, and I had no friends. We moved because they were paranoid after our neighbor was found dead in his house. I thought it was strange to move across the country because of that, but I let it go. The reason Rupert and I became friends so quickly was because we shared a deep interest in the internet and everything it had to offer. I was addicted to games and a level 10 PK-Man subscriber, while he was more of a programmer and developer. 2 years later, we were still best friends, but now we were older and smarter. Rupert had discovered the dark web and became obsessed with it. He practically spent every hour of the day on it, researching anything you could imagine. There was nothing wrong with that, but one search he made turned out to be the biggest mistake of his life. I remember waking up to dozens of texts from him one morning. That wasn't normal. Rupert wasn't very social, and it was hard to get more than a few words out of him. I opened my phone to see what he had sent me. Dude, Jack, you have to come now. This is important. Jack, please wake up. This is urgent. Where are you? Those were just some of the messages, but the rest was similar, all urgent, all telling me I needed to get to his house immediately. My parents were still at work, so I went to Rupert's house. When I arrived, there were 4 Polarside cars parked outside and dozens of people with news vans out front. I pushed through the crowd, and Rupert's mum asked the police to let me in. I could see tears streaming down her face. "What's going on, Mrs. Gonzalez?" I asked. "Rupert is missing," she said, beginning to cry. My heart sank. How could that be? He had just texted me that morning. That's when I realized, what if he was trying to warn me? What if his texts were related to his disappearance? Still in shock, I walked over to one of the detectives in the kitchen. "Is Rupert going to be okay?" I asked. "Of course he is. He'll be fine. We'll find him soon," one of the detectives replied. Something about that answer felt off. Deep down, I knew he was wrong. I had a bad feeling I'd never see Rupert again. I remembered the texts though, and pulled out my phone to show the detective. He messaged me this morning. What if this has something to do with his disappearance? I said quickly. As he started to read, his expression changed, became more serious. He told me they needed to keep my phone for the investigation and would return it later. I stayed at the house for a while, not just because I missed Rupert, but because I wanted to comfort his parents. They cared about me a lot, and it was painful to see them like that. His mother couldn't stop crying. Eventually, I went to Rupert's room to see if I could find anything that might explain why he disappeared. I tore through everything but found nothing. Then I noticed something. His computer was on, but the monitor was off. I looked for the power button and pressed it. As the screen lit up, my heart dropped. He was on the dark web. That wasn't unusual for him, but for some reason, he had dozens of tabs open. That part wasn't normal, so I closed the door, locked it, and began going through the tabs. At first, everything was fairly typical for him, but then things started to get weird. He had one tab open to an article about a murder that happened years ago. The article said a woman had been found dead in her apartment. Her body was mutilated and covered in acid. I nearly vomited reading and seeing the horrifying crime scene photos. Not wanting to see any more, I switched tabs only to find another article about another murder. Confused, I quickly flipped through the other tabs he had opened and they were all the same, all about murders or crimes. What caught my attention most though, was one article about a murder that happened 2 years ago. At first, it seemed fairly normal, but the more I read, the more I realized what it was. It was about the murder of our old neighbor, the one that made us move. A wave of panic hit me. How did Rupert know about that? I never told him, because to me, it wasn't that important. I thought it was just a strange coincidence. But then I saw the last search he had made on his computer. It was my last name. Horrified and confused, I rushed out of his room and back to the living room. "Is everything okay?" Rupert's mum asked, wiping away tears. "Yeah, I just need to head home for dinner," I replied. On the way back, so many questions filled my mind. Why was he searching my last name? Did he think I had something to do with it? That must have been why he was texting me so frantically that morning. If only I could explain to him that I didn't do anything wrong, but I couldn't. He was still missing, and I had to figure out why. When I got home, I ran to my room, locked the door, and turned on my computer. I opened the Tor browser and started my VPN. I knew what I had to do. I started typing in the letters of my last name, getting more nervous with each one. When I finally hit enter, nothing happened. Just a blank screen. Confused, I refreshed the page, but again, nothing. But why would Rupert search this if there was nothing? I thought to myself, there had to be something. I was about to close the tab, thinking it was a dead end, when suddenly, the page began to load. It took several minutes, but it finally loaded to reveal hundreds of videos. Immediately, I knew what they were. Murders. But why would they show up when searching my last name? I thought. I was ready to stop right there, knowing the horrors I'd see if I kept going. But I couldn't. I knew this had to be why Rupert disappeared, so I clicked on the first video. As it began to play, I saw what looked like a woman tied to a chair in some kind of basement or something. I recognized her quickly, was our neighbor from 2 years ago. I could tell because of the heart-shaped tattoo on her neck. She sat there for a minute, struggling, panicking, and screaming for help. Then suddenly, 2 figures entered the scene. At first, I couldn't tell who they were, but when they turned to face the camera, my heart sank. It was my parents. My dad held a knife, while my mum held a small scalpel. They paused for a moment before beginning what became the most horrifying 5 minutes of my life. I watched as they cut her apart and listened as she begged for mercy, screaming until her last breath. When the video ended, it quickly cut to another showing the same room, same chair. I was already traumatized by what I had seen and knew I couldn't watch more. My parents were murderers. And now I knew the real reason we moved 2 years ago. I had always felt something was wrong, but never imagined this was the dark secret they'd been hiding from me. I thought Rupert was trying to accuse me of being responsible for these murders, but I was very wrong. He was trying to warn me. I looked through more videos, all in the exact same room. I was about to stop, ready to go to the police and tell them everything I had seen, when I noticed something. A new video had been uploaded that day. I quickly clicked it and pressed play to reveal what looked like a man, this time tied to the chair. He had a bag over his head, and I couldn't tell who it was. But once again, I saw my parents enter the scene. My dad walked over to the man and pulled the bag off his head. At first, I couldn't tell who it was. But then I realized who I was looking at. It was Rupert.
My name is Joshua Wells, and I searched my name on the dark web. The videos I found were horrifying. Everyone Googles their own name at some point, but never make the mistake of searching your name on the dark web. I was only 19 years old when I did it. After a string of humiliating jobs and abusive bosses, I found financial independence. But that wasn't enough for me. I started learning how to buy and sell illegal items. Using my dark web browser, I engaged in illegal transactions like ordering counterfeit money and stolen IDs. I discovered a huge market for synthetic psychedelics. I often went to the skate park to sell these items from the deepest corners of the World Wide Web's underground business world. Business was good, but little did I know it would be the biggest mistake I'd ever make. A young man raised in shelters, I sought activities that gave me a sense of control. A childhood with no personal agency does that to you. My ability to navigate the online world let me get almost everything I wanted. and that gave me a sense of power. Everything was going fine until one July night when I was sitting on the second floor of a Barnes & Noble bookstore in a corner near the self-help section. I always did my best work there. The place was starting to close and I didn't have to worry about customer traffic. Even though I used a masked IP address, I never wanted to risk a home invasion. Packages were always sent to a P.O. box instead of my apartment number. In hindsight, these were all fragile security measures. Still, they gave me a false sense of comfort. I made sure there were no cameras near where I was seated. It was a small space, far from the general public. Hiding in plain sight had always been my preferred method. I drank strong coffee from a large styrofoam cup. After 15 minutes of browsing, I got bored. I typed in my name, Joshua Wells. Inputting my identity into the shadowy corner of the web should have been a sign of how arrogant and self-assured I had become. I should have kept my curiosity in check. I didn't expect Wikipedia to be among the results, but it was the third link. The first was about a ghost tour in New Jersey. The guide had a similar name. The second was a horror site I had no interest in. Although I was a thrill seeker, I wasn't into media that capitalized on other people's suffering. I clicked the third link because of the title, The Short Life of Joshua Wells. At first, the title didn't scare me since many people share my name. There were recaps of 10 episodes on the page. The first paragraph explained that the show never went beyond the first season. I read the summary of the first episode to pass the time. Episode 1. Joshua's father is a known and feared gang member. His mother is a drug addict. She tries to use her son as a drug mule on a flight from Boston to California. She hopes to profit by trafficking narcotics for a large criminal organization. Upon landing, authorities intercept them. The child is taken into Child Protective Services. He ends up at a shelter for kids. The synopsis felt disturbingly familiar. No writer or director was listed, but the air date was. The month and year matched when a nearly identical set of circumstances happened to me. The name of the center I was sent to was also Safe Harbor. I was too young to remember much, but the facts were accurate. I swallowed hard and tried to ignore it. Brushing it off as a weird coincidence, I read the summary of Episode 2. Episode 2. We follow Joshua. On his 15th birthday, he ends up in juvenile detention for the first time after throwing a chair at a teacher. Although he missed, the instructor still presses charges. Disliking the student, the teacher makes sure it sticks. In detention, Joshua befriends a troublemaker named Ian. They escape, but not before a big brawl with the other teens. They're eventually caught. The hair on my arm stood up. It was shocking how closely the events mirrored my real life. I felt a lightheaded wave hit me but kept reading, unable to stop. Episode 3. Joshua is free. He decides to rob a high-class old man's house. After days of watching the place, his goal is to steal several Rolex watches from the top drawer of the man's dresser. When he breaks in, he discovers the homeowner didn't go on his planned cruise. The man is asleep in his bedroom until Joshua accidentally wakes him. Joshua runs. He's chased outside by the man, who dies of a heart attack in the street. My chest tightened. It was all true, but I had never shared that story with anyone. It was one of my most guilt-ridden memories. I read the next two. Episode 4. Joshua has nightmares about the old man rising from a ditch and strangling him to death. He complains about night terrors to a counselor, who refers him to a doctor. He ends up selling anti-anxiety pills after disliking their effects. A girl he dates overdoses and ends up in the hospital but survives. He feels terrible, but not enough to stop dealing. He uses the profits to buy a PC and learns how to hack people's privacy with a group of credit card thieves he met at a mall. Episode 5. Joshua discovers the dark web. He uses it to sell low-level drugs at first. Later, he reads headlines about some of his associates getting arrested. Still, he remains involved in illicit activities. I looked at the air date for Episode 6. It was the same 24-hour period I was currently living in. Episode 6. Joshua enters a bookstore to use the internet and try to make money. He doesn't notice a bald man in a Carhartt t-shirt below him, browsing the sci-fi section. The stranger is actually an undercover FBI agent. The government official has a mic and a camera hidden under his shirt. He's looking for the criminal, though he hasn't identified him yet. A takedown begins. They pin Joshua, punch him, and tase him. He's handcuffed. My hands were shaking. I stood up, grabbed a book by Eckhart Tolle to look less suspicious, and opened it. I tilted my head over the railing to look at the ground floor below me. A man matching the article's description was there. His shirt was loose, hiding what I knew was a gun at his waist. He was holding a paperback. I picked up my phone. I pretended to have a conversation with an imaginary business associate about stocks. I closed the laptop with one hand and headed down the escalator. I walked toward the back where there were stacks of hardcover books on history. I found an unstaffed door and went through it. I was in a storage area. Unopened boxes were piled everywhere. I saw no employees and ran toward a rear exit. I sprinted through a wide alley between the building and a row of motels. I passed an art gallery and a liquor store before my heartbeat began to slow. On the way, I came across a closed vegan restaurant called Balentes a Terre. The place was dark inside, but its neon sign still glowed. A picnic table sat on the front lawn. I sat down there. I opened my laptop again and connected to their free Wi-Fi. No problem. I scrolled through the rest of the timeline. The remaining episodes were all set in the future. I wiped the sweat from my forehead as I read the description of the next episode. Episode 7. A darknet market operator hits the media. 3 out of 7 charges against him lead to convictions, including conspiracy to traffic narcotics. He's released early after agreeing to cooperate with multiple agencies. He becomes a cybersecurity awareness consultant and a social engineering expert. After giving a keynote speech out of town, he returns home. His girlfriend Olivia and her family have been murdered. My eyes widened, and my breathing grew shallow. Episode 8. Joshua walks through her house. The walls are stained with dried blood. Every corner is vandalized. Her body lies on the living room couch. Her parents have socks stuffed in their mouths and deep wounds in their stomachs. Joshua calls the police and is treated as the main suspect by the media for days. He's eventually cleared, but the psychological damage is too much to bear. He reflects on the words, even though he's still young. It was true that Liv meant everything to me. Episode 9. Joshua is admitted to a psychiatric hospital. He stares at the padded walls as if waiting for them to talk to him. Detectives visit him, hoping for more information. They tell him they know the massacre he discovered was the work of an active serial killer. Episode 10. Joshua jumps out the window. He breaks his ankle. A rush of adrenaline allows him to move across the field and reach the nearest highway. He runs into traffic. A freight truck swerves past him and crashes into a line of vehicles. He makes his way to the nearest lake, where he fills his pockets with stones. He waits until nightfall and walks into the abyss. The last image we see is his hand breaking the surface of the water. The starlight glistens on his skin before his fingers disappear beneath the surface. His final gulps of water create bubbles that rise to the top. I absorbed how the rest of my existence would unfold. 4 black SUVs pulled up and surrounded me, in the parking lot. Men in black suits and the undercover agent from the bookstore ran toward me. Even though I didn't resist, they still slammed me to the ground. They dislocated my shoulder and kicked my jaw a few times before cuffing me. Sentence was reduced in prison after I agreed to cooperate in catching people like me. After my release date, I tried to revisit that link without success. I couldn't understand how that article existed in the first place. I've read that extreme stress can open up insights and portals to the unknown. I'd bet on the latter, although sometimes I feel like it's not for me to understand. I don't want to surrender to what fate has written for me. My escape from the bookstore gave me confidence that I can change the outcome of the dark web prophecy.